So, what are the different ways that vitamin D affects the immune system? How does it influence it?
Right. So one very interesting way is, and I call it it has some kind of Pac-Man skill. You know Pac-Man from
Of
the old
course.
arcade
Yes.
games?
The
So,
the yellow ball that swallows everything.
yes, exactly. So those dots before him, actually, you could compare those to viruses, and Pac-Man itself would be an immune cell. So basically, Pac-Man engulfs like the dots completely, which is what an immune cell does with a virus it encounters. So what happens is it engulfs the virus completely, so the virus cannot like go out and about, so to speak, and create problems for us. The Pac-Man skill I'm talking about, we call that phagocytic ability. So our immune cells have a phagocytic or Pac-Man kind of ability.
How many different ways are there that vitamin D influences the immune system?
So there are 5 main ways. I just mentioned Pac-Man. The second one is vitamin D has a great impact on the health of our epithelium. And let me explain that. So your airways, the inside of your nose, in the back of your throat, your lungs, even in your intestines. Okay, so it's covered with epithelial cells, which is basically the inner lining of the airways and the intestines. It's coated with epithelial cells, and together they are the epithelium. So vitamin D actually strengthens the epithelial cells barrier. So it has like a protective function.
So,
So
so
if there's something wrong with epithelial cells, if they're not healthy enough, that's an issue because viruses directly target epithelial cells. They they want to they hold on to the epithelial cell, and then they can start their process of creating an infection and multiplying, etc., etc. So vitamin D keeps that layer of epithelial cells intact. That's a massive, important function of vitamin D.
all right. So, what else can the vitamin D do for the immune system? You mentioned so far 2 ways, right? You said there are altogether 5.
Yes.
What's number 3?
Yeah, so the third one is we have our microbiome, and we've talked about that in previous episode, that the microbiome is actually about more or less 70% of our immune system. So it's an incredibly important part of our immune system, and vitamin D actually sort of directs the microbiome. It's sort of the instruction manual.
So pretty much vitamin D is like the manager of the microbiome. So microbiome are the workers, and vitamin D is the manager, and then our brains are the boss, CEO.
Yeah, sort of comparable. They have a lot of things to carry out, a lot of functions, and without vitamin D, it will get too messy.
Or
Yeah.
maybe like a vice manager or something like that.
Yeah. Well, somebody running the department. Yeah.
Sure, sure. All right. So basically, if people have enough vitamin D, then they are happy campers. Is that it?
Yeah, that's actually quite funny because vitamin D can also upregulate a compound which is involved in immunity, and this compound is called CAMP.
Oh, okay. That's all right. So what is it? What does CAMP stand for?
Cathecillidin antimicrobial peptide. And that's a
Uh-huh.
mouthful. So let's just call
Yep.
it CAMP.
Camp is better.
Yeah.
Let's stick with camp. What does camp do to turn people into happy campers?
So one thing that CAMP does is it increases the antimicrobial activity of immune cells. So basically that means they are more active toward viruses and other pathogens.
Okay.
So that's one. But I would like to add one thing to that, is that it has been established that they also have this antimicrobial activity against enveloped viruses. What is an enveloped virus? It's basically the outer part of the virus. And in regard to coronaviruses, I mean, I think most of us are familiar that we have those viruses have those spikes on the outside. Right?
For visual representation, there is a picture for any listeners you can go to our YouTube channel, and on our YouTube channel you can watch the full episode. And George, continue with the envelope virus, please.
Right. So CAMP has been shown to target envelope viruses pretty efficiently.
Mhm.
And the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes a COVID-19 infection, is also an envelope virus.
Mhm.
So that's good news. So vitamin E definitely, we definitely want to keep our levels up so it can upregulate this particular compound as well.
So what about the non-enveloped viruses? Are those different in any... Like, I know they're different in a way, of course, but like, are they somehow different regarding vitamin D? Or is there just a completely different topic?
Well, the thing is, like, vitamin D is good for our immune system in different aspects, right? So it's just that this particular compound, which is regulated by vitamin D, is just very effective against envelope viruses. Now, if you have non-envelope viruses, they behave completely different. So this particular compound won't be as effective because it doesn't have that envelope. But it doesn't matter because you still need to have healthy levels of vitamin D for a healthy immune function.
Yes.
So I wouldn't fuss about it too much. It's just an interesting thing to note, especially for coronaviruses and other envelope viruses.
And speaking of healthy amounts of vitamin D, we are going to get to that part in the podcast, so stay with us. And the last part that you mentioned, the fifth method that vitamin D regulates, controls the immune system, what is it?
Sorry, I forgot to just mention one thing, is where can we find that camp, the happy campers? We can find them, and we just talked about it, in epithelial cells. So, and in lung cells. And lung cells, it's also part of the whole epithelium. So that is an interesting thing as well.
Hence why smoking is not advised.
Yeah, smoking actually weakens your epithelial cells. So to be smoking, especially if you're wearing a mask and you take it off and just to smoke and then you put your mask back on, yeah, that it's not really an ideal situation.
It's like sitting in a glass box full of smoke.
Yeah.
But what about we're getting off topic here a little bit.
So
yeah,
we have one more compound. It also upregulates defensin. And defensin works very well with CAMP together.
Defensin, that sounds... Okay, defensin and CAMP, they sound very much military-like terms, you know? This is a camp on the defensin compound, or whatever they say. So why defensin? Is it... Do you know do you know the origin for defensin, or is that just different origin names in the future episode we can talk about?
Yeah, if you want me to know, like, a lot of those names, you need to understand it comes from Latin. And I flunked Latin in high school, so I'm not the one to ask. But yeah, they have a Latin origin, and I'm not really sure where it comes from exactly.
Okay, all right.
I'm sure some listeners would be more familiar with that.
Yeah, wouldn't it be cool to have a whole episode in Latin? Wow. But our
Let's
ability
not
is
do
not
that.
there. Let's not do that, yeah. Okay, so
defensin, it makes sure the virus doesn't replicate as easily. And that's major, because basically the only reason we are getting like symptoms is because the virus has had a chance to replicate. You know, the more viruses, and we already know the viral load, if somebody coughs in your face, is infected with the virus, okay, you get a lot more particles inside than when you accidentally touch a doorknob with a few viruses and then you rub in your eye. For example, there's a major difference in viral load. So that person that would get sick from rubbing their eye would not have as many symptoms as getting coughed in the face.
My God, getting coughed in the face, that's the worst, I think. You're like, oh no, don't get me sick.
And you feel those little water droplets.
Oh, that's just nasty. Listen to the entire episode of the Immunity Podcast.
Link in the description below.